Hello, beautiful people. In today's episode, I got the pleasure of speaking to Daniel Bourke, and Daniel is a guy who makes YouTube videos and writes about the crossover of health, technology, and art on his website, mrdbourke.com. He's the machine learning instructor for the Zero to Mastery Academy, and he has over 65,000 subscribers on YouTube, and his videos help people learn better and live healthier. His slogan is Eat, Move, Learn, Make, and this is the first time we've ever spoke, but weirdly it seemed like we'd been friends for a long time because of the way the internet works, where I've been reading his thoughts, he's been reading my thoughts, and together it made an incredible conversation. This episode is brought to you by Tuesday Treasure, and this is my weekly newsletter where I find and compile the coolest things I see every week, and it's a simple, informative, quick newsletter. It leaves you with more energy after reading it than you had before, and people enjoy it because it adds value to their life and it's very easily consumable. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can find that at dannymiranda.com/Tuesday. And now, without further ado, let's get to it.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
Well, let's just get to it and start it off. So
too easy.
Yeah, what? First of all, what does too easy mean? You've said that like 7 times, and I'm like, I've never heard this phrase once.
You're probably going to hear a lot of Australian lingo throughout this. How do I explain this? Too easy. It just means it's like a version of all good kind of thing.
Yeah,
or like
it makes sense.
Whatever we're doing is easy. So it's like we don't have to worry.
Dude, I feel like Australians are just so much more relaxed and so much calmer. Like, you know, Americans are so uptight, it feels like sometimes.
Man, truth be told, I've been to the US like a couple of times, and that's the exact vibe that I've got too. I was like when we go to, wait, actually, where are you from?
I'm from New York, but I lived in San Diego for the past year, so
nice.
I'm more on your wavelength than the New York one, but it's all good.
Yeah, man. Well, that's what I noticed when I went over to the US. Like we'd be getting ready for an event or something like that, and there'd be guys there like, "Yeah, we gotta go, we're gonna be late, man. We gotta get the ride." And me and my Australian friend, is actually my godfather, we were over there, and we were just like, "Well, man, just take it easy. We'll figure it out. Like worst case, we miss this car ride, we'll get the next one, or we can walk." And they're like, "What? What are you talking about? We've got to get there, man." I'm like, "No, it's okay. Just chill."
Yeah.
And they did not like the fact that we were chill.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy when you're just like, when you are just a calm person, it like kind of pisses people off who aren't calm. But
yes. I get that a lot with my little brother. My little brother's like straight edge, like up and down, has to be like on the clock all the time, whatever, and I'm kind of like head in the clouds. So we balance each other pretty well.
But what's crazy, dude, is your head in the clouds, but you've produced so much amazing content over the past like 3 years. Like, how have you done that? How have you like managed that calm attitude with also just like being consistent and quote unquote grinding? Like, how have you managed that balance?
Yeah, you're kind of right. Actually, there's a lot of crap that I put out there. Some of it's good, but it's, look, when I say like head in the clouds, like it's a balance, right? So it's like a lot of the time I'm like cheering around like we are now, like just chilling out, having a conversation or whatever. But then when it comes to like doing what I need to do, like I kind of spent the last, if I spent the last 3 years getting good at anything, it's getting good at doing just one thing. Mm-hmm. So it's like if I need to do something, it's like that's all I'm doing for the next 4 hours until it's done. So whether that goes for writing or making a video or coding something up or making materials, it's just zoned in, 4 good hours a day. That seems to be my going rate, and that seems to be enough sometimes. And so, whatever happens in there, that's what usually gets published.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I found your stuff. I don't even know how, whether it be like through a mention that you mentioned me, or I sent you a message and then I was like, oh my God, this dude's stuff is amazing. But like, dude, your writing is incredible to me. And I really mean that. And it's like, what I love about it so much is just the honesty and authenticity of it. It feels like you're my boy, you know. It feels like we're friends, and you're writing and just giving me access to your diary and just like telling me interesting things and cool things. So, like, how did you get to that point of where it's just like a conversational style?
Yeah, well, I like what you just said. Actually, that's kind of what I want it to be. Is like, so I never used to, like, I got turned off reading in school. Just because you had to, basically the teacher would say, you need to read this, you need to read that. And then I got turned off writing in university because it was like, you need to write this essay. It needs to be 1,000 words and you need to have a reference for basically anything you say. And I'm just like, wow, well, this is boring. Mm-hmm. But then I started, a couple of years ago, I just started like writing frantically. It was after breaking up with a girlfriend, and I was basically heartbroken, just trying to figure out what the hell this feeling was. Because outside, like my energy is, if you ever asked me or asked someone else, who knows me, is just like this ball of energy just moving through space. But then I was like, oh, I'm kind of having to put this on at the moment because inside I'm feeling like shit. And then I just started journaling like every day, basically, like typing into a website called 750 Words. And I'm like, you know what? This is pretty fun. Like the first month or so of doing it, it was like, who am I to be having these thoughts and putting them on paper? And then I sort of got into it. I'm like, you know what? This is fun. And then so I fell back in love with writing. I fell back in love with reading because I was reading just ways to feel better, basically. And all it was just heartbreak, simple thing. And I was like, you know what? I was getting back when I was a kid, I remember being 12 and reading 10 books in a day or something like that and just feeling awesome. I was getting back that feeling. I'm like, wow, this is cool. It's fun when you don't have a criteria to read or write. You're just sort of following your own interest. And then I just decided, you know what? I've done enough of this reading and whatnot of other people's posts and whatever. So I'm going to start putting my own out there. And then the single criteria, and I still have it to this day, is would I like to read this or would I like to watch this? And then that's all it is. So if I'm reading back on my own work and I'm like, oh, does this sound like a lawyer would write this? Then I delete it and make it sound better. Well, at least to me.
Yeah, that's what I loved about you. You had something in one of your posts where it was like, if GPT-3 could write this, then I don't want to publish it. And we'll get more into GPT-3 later, because you have some experience with data science and all that great stuff and a lot of experience at that. But just like your mindset was like, all right, I want it to be weird. I want it to be so out there. I want it to be interesting, so much so that a data processing system and writing machine couldn't write it. I thought that was very interesting.
Man, that's exactly it. So if I want it to be as if literally we were having a conversation right now. And I know there's a style, that's just frankly, that's just the writing that I like to read. If someone so it's kind of a conversation like we're having now is kind of almost all over the place. It's like a stream of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I understand there's a time and a place for having structured writing and whatnot. But I just find it, first of all, fun to read because it kind of flows naturally. It's like a dance. And then it's fun to write because you're not you're just letting your thoughts flow as they are and then typing them into a keyboard as you go. So that's really all that I'm trying to do. And it's kind of, I like to try and keep it as close to the exact truth as possible. I mean, you have some crazy thoughts, and if they ever went down on paper, most of us would probably end up locked up. But it's like people are having, like, people are people, man. We have these thoughts, like we want to know, like we don't just want to read like this the suit talk and all that sort of stuff. Like why do people skip terms and conditions? Because it's just like I can't, like I look at a paragraph in terms and conditions and be like, what the hell? Like this is like Chinese to me, even though I know that it's in English. And so, and frankly, I get kind of obsessed with it. Like I'll read it, and like someone will send me something and I'll read theirs, and I kind of like, I obviously want to like put my own input in, but it's especially like if someone's sending me a draft or something like that, I don't want to be too aggressive with it. But it's I don't know, that's it's one of my favorite activities, man. Writing and just being I don't find anything more beautiful than a well-crafted sentence. Maybe a sunset or a sunrise, but a well-crafted sentence is good to look at.
So when did you get started with just writing in general? Because yeah,
it's actually a very succinct date. I think it was September 21, 2016.
Almost
or maybe
4 years ago, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe I'm just getting confused with the recency bias that 2 days ago was September 21. Anyway, I think it was 21 of something, but it was definitely mid 2016 or mid to late 2016. And then, I just decided, you know what, I'd spent too much time like consuming just information on the internet. It's like, it's time to shift that balance, you know?
Yeah.
I've read enough stuff online. I've browsed enough Facebook, Instagram, and just sat up in bed, like scrolling through an infinite scroll. I'm just like, I just got tired of my own bullshit. Just like thinking that, you know what, I could make these things and then not actually doing it. And so like then I've got like a post on my blog, like today I started my blog, and then it kind of just went on from there. And it's hard to think, man, because it feels like longer than 4 years, but when you put it in perspective, it's like, wow, I was at university for longer than that. So it was about 2016 where I completely just went, you know what, I'm going to reshift my balance from being a consumer to being a creator, and whatever that takes, I'm not sure, like I'll just figure it out. But basically it was just a simple equation. It's just like, am I spending as much time making things as I am consuming things? And when I asked myself that question 4 years ago, it was no. And now I would say I've got the balance probably in the right order for me, as in I probably create more than I consume these days. And I like it that way at the moment. Who knows, it might change, but I think for the time being, it'll keep going in that direction.
I love it, bro, because it's like your story and your honesty about your story resonates so much with me. And it's amazing how you make that decision, and you know, like you're in that place of consuming. And when I was in that place of consuming every day, it's like, it doesn't feel the same as when you're creating every day. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference in your soul, at least for me personally, that just like it exudes to everything I do now. Like, oh, I'm a creator. I create things. We're creating with this conversation, right? And it's a false belief to think that whoever's listening to this, is not a creator, because as a person, you are inherently a creative being, and you are inherently a creator. So, yeah, man, I'm just really inspired by just the way your journey so far.
Yeah, well, it's well, thank you. I appreciate that. But it's once you flick the switch, everything, like you look at the world, it's kind of like a different filter on the world. Like I remember like thinking like back a couple of years ago, like, wow, I can't wait to get some time off to browse my phone, to keep going through social media. Like I'd take a break at work or whatever and be like, yes, finally I get that dopamine hit of scrolling through Facebook feed, of seeing posts of people I never talked to. But now it's like, oh, okay, now I look at the world and go, wow, that's I'll walk past someone and they'll like throw off an off remark or something like that. They'll be talking to someone else and it'll be a cool saying or something like that. And I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to pocket that, and I'm going to use that in one of my articles sometime.
That's great.
You look at the world in a different way.
Absolutely. And so you started your writing journey in 2016, and then you said to yourself, I believe 3 years ago, you said to yourself in 2017, okay, now I'm going to be a data scientist, and I've never been a data scientist before, right? So tell me, like, why data science in particular, and like what you were thinking when you were creating your journey and documenting your journey.
So the story was, I was working, well, so I've always been a nerd. Like, I grew up a like tech nerd, always into video games, always into the latest and greatest technology, still am. And I was, at the time, I was working at Apple, like at the retail store, like as I was a genius at Apple. So one of those guys who fixes your computer, like when you come in and whatever. But I never, truth be told, I never really, I much preferred like talking to people as they came in. So this is probably counter argument to my own journey right now. But I much preferred talking to different customers than like going down into the dungeon. We had this little like basement repair room with all the hardware that was there. And it came to a point, like one day as well, I was like getting excited. We were launching some new product or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm sick of like shucking this stuff and not knowing like how it works internally. I want to start making it, as in like, rather than like repairing it hands on, like I want to start writing the code that these things are running and build applications and whatnot. And before that, like I tried to learn to code like a couple of times, but just failed because when it got hard, I just gave up. And then, so I left Apple, and me and a few friends, we like had the idea. We wanted to build a website, basically the Airbnb of gyms, because we had this problem every time we tried to work out, because we lived on different sides of town together. Like he'd be at one gym, I'd be at another gym, and then we'd try to go in and we'd be like, oh, you need to sign all this paperwork and yada, yada, yada. Give us your phone number. I'm like, this just is a pain in the ass every single time we have to come in here. And so our idea was, wouldn't it be great if we just had a little simple website you could go to and you're like, oh, there's Gym X. I'd like to take a one pass to that place. Pay you $10 or $15 or whatever it was. And then boom, you can just walk in. You have a QR code or something like that on your phone. And so we thought this was an incredible idea, and we started building a website and whatever. And then we went around and actually, so while we're building the website, we were learning to code along the way. And then we went to the gyms and we realized, oh, you know what? We've got this great little application. Would you like to use it? And they said no. And we're like, what? And they're like, we got to talking with a few of the managers of different gyms, and they're like, hey, guys, I know you're trying to get more people in the door and your service seems great, but like he was really honest with us. He's like, our business depends on people not showing up. And we were like, oh, like, so that, like the average gym, like one that we talked to had like something like 3,000 paying members, but only 200 would show up at least once a week.
Wow.
So yeah, exactly. So our whole thing of trying to get more people in the door just completely didn't work against how their business model actually works. So there's something to be said about gyms there. Anyway, so that idea kind of failed once we realized, you know what, this is not going to work unless we have gyms. Like we can have plenty of customers like from the consumer side, but it won't work unless we can give them access to the gyms. So that kind of fizzled out because he had to do his own thing, and I was sort of I didn't have a job. I was living off savings, so I kind of had all the time in the world. And while I was researching different technologies to build this website, all I could hear about was like machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I'm like, wow, this sounds pretty cool. So I researched a bit more and data science and whatnot. And then I was like, I kind of got into it and I was like, whoa, so you're telling me that you feed a computer a lot of data and it figures out the patterns in itself on its own, and you don't have to write all this code that I'm kind of writing to build this website. And I kept looking into it more, and it turns out that's kind of the basic premise of what data science and machine learning is. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool, because me designing this website is pretty tedious. So I'd rather just let the computer do all the things for me. And so I just went online, found another online course, and there was this really charismatic individual who was selling it to me basically. And I signed up and got a little scared because 2 weeks out, when I signed up, I didn't read the prerequisites, and it's like, oh, you need X amount of like 6 months experience in this coding language. And I'd never used that coding language. And so I'm like, oh crap, this was a $1,300 online course for the next 6 months. And I don't have any experience doing any of the things that they're going to be teaching. So I only had like $6,000 or something in savings for until I got a job basically. So that was a large amount of money for me. It still kind of is. I mean, $1,300 for any kind of learning resource. Anyway, cut a short story long. I emailed the support team and said, hey, what's your refund policy? They're like, well, you can refund up to 2 weeks before the course. And I decided, you know what? I've got nothing else on. I'm going to just learn everything I need to as I go. And because I'd already been to university, the best thing I took away from university was learning how to learn. So I kind of backed my own ability to be able to figure things out. And so I said, well, worst case, I figure things out along the way. I just send some emails saying, hey, this is why my assignment's late, etc. And I'll figure it out along the way. And so I did that. And it got pretty lonely because I was studying basically in my bedroom the whole time. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start writing about this stuff online and see if there are any other nerds out there like me studying in their bedrooms. And it turned out that there was, because I mean, the last few years, online learning is just growing, especially in the last probably 6 to 9 months. And I just kept going from there. And I figured, you know what? This is going to be a form of both accountability for me and a way to just meet other people and a way to share and practice the things that I've learned. So if I can create materials about the things that I'm learning, well, that's going to help me figure out all this new stuff. And so that one course turned into a few more, turned into getting a job, turned into leaving that job, turned into creating my own course to teach the people that were asking, or to answer the question that I got asked the most often, and I still do. I want to learn machine learning. Where do I start? And so basically that kind of, if you put that timeline together, that ends up into 3 years, and now we're here.
Dude, it's an incredible story, and it just brings me so much joy because it's like you just put yourself into something, you do it enough, you do it long enough, you help people, you act with pure intent, and like great things happen. You on the beginning of that story, you said something that stuck out to me, which was you had tried to code before, but you quit because it got too hard. But obviously, this point, the time that you ended up sticking it through, you didn't quit. So what was the difference between when you tried to quit and when you didn't?
Oh, so this is probably the third or fourth time that I actually sat down and went, you know what, I'm gonna put in time now. I think the main difference was, and see, this is probably my memory failing me, I'm probably generating a nice narrative around it. I think that the real main difference was I kind of had no other option this time. Like I didn't have a job. I was living off savings, living with my parents. And so it was like, well, what else are you going to do, Daniel? Like kind of thing. It's like, well, you could just sit around and watch Discovery Channel all day or play video games, or you can actually learn this skill that you've said to yourself the past few years that you've wanted to learn. Whereas the previous times are kind of, I remember there was one time me and my friend Dave, we were like, I was at university, he was working a full-time job, and so he would come over after work and we'd sit down at nights and we'd do it. And that lasted probably maybe a month at max or whatever, and we were trying to learn to code together because it was just something that we were both interested in. And then it kind of fizzled out. And then there was another time where I go through online tutorials and whatnot, and that lasted about a month. But then other things came up, like I think it was maybe university assignments or something like that, and yada yada yada. And there was always just something in the way. But this time it was seriously like I had nothing else to do, and it's a kind of like red thread that I've noticed in what I've been doing the last couple of years is that rarely do I function well when I've got like 6 things on at one time. So it's like I'm working on a fairly large project at the moment, and I'm kind of excited that I've like written everything else off, except talking to awesome people like yourself, and except for this project. And so it's like that's all that I'm like thinking, breathing, eating is just what I'm working on at the moment. And so, yeah, I think there's no real secret to it. Like that was just, I was unemployed. I had this skill that I'd been wanting to learn, telling myself this story for probably almost 5 to 6 years, or longer maybe. And I was just like, are you gonna actually do it, or is it gonna be like that thing that you just talked about for X amount of years and just never acted on it? And so that was kind of it. And then also I'd like at this point, like when I was like a few months into it, I'd like published an article basically saying this is what I'm doing. This is my self-created AI master's degree. And that was all in public. And that kind of, even though there was probably like maybe 0, I usually treat most things as like having 0 viewers, but I kind of considered like, well, this is in public now. And so I'm going to look like a spectacular failure if I don't live up to this.
There's a certain level of skin in the game that you're taking when you're publishing under your own name and you're saying, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do. Like I said to everyone now, like I'm publishing podcasts Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'm posting twice on my blog on Monday and Thursday. And if I don't do that, like there's a certain level of public accountability there. So yeah, it's very important to like even if no one is listening, you're putting that out there. You're making a statement under your own name, and that's valuable. And so for anyone listening, trying to do something, like make a statement under your own name. It's different than acting anonymously or under a different name. Like when your name is attached to it, like at least the way I look at it, when your name is attached to it, you want everything you put out to be the highest quality. So, yeah. Oh
yes, I have the utmost respect for people who stand by their creations, their own name. That's what is it? The honor. What can you say, for lack of a better word? Honor, respect, because it's easy to be anonymous online, and I do understand there's like places for that, like having a stage name or something like that. But yeah, being able to put your name on your own creations and date certainty. That's also, I applaud you for that. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the Tuesday, Thursday, having a date certainty. I don't really have date certainties. I promise people that more things will be out there, but who knows when.
Yeah, but at the same time, you did publish every day for 500 plus days on your website, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that is date certainty. That's like the extreme level of what I'm talking about. And that's when you see someone who does that and you're like, oh, like I see someone who does it. I'm like, oh my God, like, I see eye to eye with them. Like I know they're already like on the same page as me because you're building a skill. You're doing it in public. You're doing it every day. And if you want to get better at something, just do it every day, man. Like it's that easy. And yeah, man, huge respect and huge ups for that. Like talk to me about that journey. Like 500 plus days of writing every single day on your website. What is that like?
Yeah, well, I figured I was going to be writing. I usually write every day. Like my 2 favorite activities in life are fighting and writing. So like writing code or writing words, whichever it may be. But I was writing I have a little tradition that's every like birthday, I'll write like a listicle that's flavored in the year that I turn. So like 25, I'll write 25 points about whatever. And so the 25 article was 25 things I'm going to do before I'm 26. And so one of them, maybe it was number 21 or something like that. I can't remember. Oh, I'm thinking of the number 21 a lot. Oh, maybe that's a trend or something. Anyway, I don't know what number it was, but there was one of them that was write a blog post every day for a year, and that was going to be number one. So that started September 1st, 2018, and then I just all it was just a single blog post every single day, no questions asked, on whatever I was thinking, basically. And then it turned into, I got to the year mark. And so there were times where I think I almost missed like one day. Like I actually missed one day, whereas it was like 11:54 and I was going to bed. I think I had like just a lot on that day or something. And just, I mean, no excuses, but, and then I like got into bed and I sat up like scared. I was like, oh my gosh, I've missed this. I didn't write an article today. And so I was tired as hell, pulled out my laptop and then just started punching away and posted at like 12:04 or something like that. Yeah, exactly. I seriously remember sitting up, like it's funny, those moments, like, you know, when you wake up late or something and you realize that, oh, I've got something, and it's like waking up isn't even a thing. Like that's how I want to like wake up every morning is just get out of bed and there's something on like immediately. But yeah, and so what it was like most of the time it would be, because I write in a journal almost every day, would be like a post would evolve around like the gibberish that I would put into the journal, or if I was reading a book or something like that and my thoughts were hovering around that book, I would try and figure out turn that book into my own words and then publish that. And then it kind of got like to like just as well as like stories of me interacting with people, and then it got to the year mark and I was like, you know what, I'm going to keep going. And so I did keep going, and it ended up being 528 days until I hit that. And some days I'd be like, you know what, I don't really feel like publishing. And I was just like, nope, I've said this, I'm going to publish an article, and just ignored that voice. I don't know where that comes from. It's just like, why are you trying to self-sabotage yourself? Mm-hmm. So it's like having this argument in my head. And then there'd be times like people would ask me questions and I'd turn that into a blog post of some sort. So there's limitless amounts of things that you can create. But then I got to 528 days and I'm like, you know what? I've got a larger writing project that I'm working on. I want to finish. So I'm writing like a novel at the moment. I'm like, I want to finish this, and I want to not have myself spread across too many different things. So I took the approach, you know what, I'm going to cut this off at 528. We've had a good run. It's been an amazing amount of fun. And I'm going to finish off this other writing project that I've kind of been half-assing because I've had to publish a blog post every day. And so now all of my writing energy goes towards that.
I love it. I love it because it's thoughtful, right? Like you're saying to yourself, okay, like this project served me writing every day, and now I'm going to take that energy and the things that I've learned from doing that and bring it to a new avenue, a new project. And that's awesome. And so your novel was actually something that I wanted to talk to you about, because it's just like you've now written most of your work, I would say, on your blog is nonfiction. And what is the transition like to now go into fiction? Is that something you've done before? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I kind of, even though my posts are like a lot of them are nonfiction themed, like there's a fair few that are like just story themed as well. Like one of my articles that kind of went, I don't know, lack of a better word, viral on Medium was like a listicle type article, but it was written in narrative form. So it was like how I study during the day, but it was like kind of a journey, like 5 tips to better learn something. But it was like from waking up in the morning to going to bed at night. And so we spoke about this before, but that's the kind of writing that I like to read, that are like narrative, but with like philosophy built in. So there's some saying out there about novels being, I can't remember, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something along the lines of novels just being a story around someone's personal philosophies or something like that, or built in by that. I think it was Camus or something like that. He said that. Anyway, but yeah, that's the kind of, when I read books, I like to read not too much science fiction, but as in like just the story of like a regular person, but they've just written about their life. So if you imagine it, if you've ever heard of Charles Bukowski, Hunter S. Thompson, John Fante, Amy Hempel, like they're all of my favorite writers. I'm just like, my bookshelf isn't in my room at the moment, but I'm just trying to mentally walk through it. Celine, Henry Miller, so James Frey, yeah. So they're all my favorite authors, and they're kind of the common theme of them is they're just writing about day-to-day life. And so that's what my novel is it's a kind of coming of age story mixed in with a little bit of nerdy stuff, because I mean I am a machine learning engineer, so it's got some of that in there. And then it's got a few things that are kind of pure fiction, but then most of it is just based off pure experience. Like I'd be sitting in a meeting in a tech job, and this is what it's like in narrative form. So I'm giving away too many spoilers, but it's I would say it's the same kind of experience. It's in terms of writing, like I find it actually wrote itself. Like as in, when I say that, it's there was not a single time where I faced like writer's block or whatever. It was just a stream of consciousness out. The first draft was completely longhand. So I've got about 6 or 7 notepads somewhere in this room, and that are just filled with handwriting. I just sit down at a cafe in the morning and write for like an hour. Usually that'd be enough to get a whole chapter out. And then, after a while, it kind of got to a point, I'm like, yeah, this is probably a good place to finish. And so then I spent like a month or 2 during COVID typing it up. And now it's just in the process of getting it edited. I've got an amazing editor. I believe she's from Connecticut. I edited it myself for like 3 or 4 drafts. And then I'm like, you know what? I want to just see what it's like with someone else's eyes on it. And so I actually posted a gig for someone to edit my work, and received like 130 or so applications. And that was a bit of a nightmare to go through, because I'm hopeless with email. But I replied to every single one and found a few that stood out. And so I'd send them samples and whatnot. And then, because I've written it in a very distinct style, something that I would like to read. And so it's not like your typical sort of novel that you would pick up and read. That was like one of my criteria, is like, well, I could publish this myself almost right now because I'm very happy with it, but I want to make it really tight. So I want to see what these editors think. And a few read it and were basically like, oh, you can't publish this style. I'm like, well, too bad. I'm publishing it like this. and then one, yeah, they're like, this is not traditional. I'm like, well, good. That's what I want. That's like, I specifically designed it to be like that. And then one like reply was like, wow, I love this. Like, and one could argue that, oh yeah, you should take into account like the criticism. And I was like, nah, you know what? I like this. I would read this. Mm-hmm. And so, she replied back. She's like, wow, I love this style. We can definitely keep it this way. I'll just help you make sure like there aren't any holes or whatnot. First time novelists often do these mistakes. And turns out she was completely right. I had a bunch of things that I'd miss and whatnot. But anyway, that should come out sometime towards the end of the year. It's been good fun. I can't wait to do the next one.
Dude, I cannot wait to read this book, and I'm so excited because you know what it is? It's your nonfiction stuff. Like, you're writing a story often. It's like you with a girl, you meeting someone. I'm like, it's almost as if it could be fiction. And so if it's anything like that, and even if it's not anything like that, I'm really excited just to check it out. And you brought up the how you found an editor. And this was actually something that stood out to me and was one of your lessons on your 27 lessons post that really stood out. And talk to me about just the importance of the follow-up.
Oh, yes. So, so that the story from that came from, as I said, I put a job posting up. So I actually, because I'd never hired an editor before, I actually emailed Derek Sivers and I was like, "Hey, Derek, like, do you have any experience hiring editors?" Which I knew he kind of did. I'm editing my book. Where should I look for an editor? And Derek, being Derek, got back to me in like under 2 days and said, "Oh, Daniel, so cool to hear. You should go to efa.org. It's amazing. I've used it to hire 60 plus editors for my different projects." I'm like, "Okay, sweet. Well, it's good enough for Derek. It's good enough for me." And then I went to efa.org. So big shout out to Derek Sivers. Thank you, Derek. I went to efa.org, and so that's Editorial Freelance Association. So it's basically like a marketplace. If I'm a writer and I need something edited, I can post this job posting, and then editors from all over the world can say, "Hey, I'd like to edit your work." And so that's what I did. I kind of posted it and I described it what it was. I'm like, "Oh, we've got the book. It's called Charlie Walks. It's in this sort of style. It's written. Charlie's this person at a tech company and he wants to be a writer, and here's how the story kind of flows." And then there's a little part where it was like, "How much do you want to pay?" And they had their like default rates. It was like whatever. And I kind of went to the higher end of the default rate because I'm like, well, this is a project of love. I want to, and a plus, I want to pay someone if they're going to do a good job. And then it was like, what qualifications does someone need for this? And I was like, well, I don't really care. Have you edited a novel before? Tell me what you did for that. And so because I posted that at about 10 p.m. and then went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and the first email that I read was someone going, like, warning me that I was about to get a barrage of emails. And they said, because you listed that you don't need any credentials. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. And then that person was 100% right. I just got more emails than I'd probably ever received in the space of 24 hours. And so I had all these people going, like, they were really excited, going, "Hey, I'd love to edit your book. I read the bio. It sounds amazing. Here's my experience." And they put this incredible amount of effort into pitching their services to help me out. And so I'm like I was getting a bit of anxiety going through all these emails because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to, what if, like, I miss someone here and whatever, like, who's going to be the right one? So anyway, I was just like, this is simple. I'll just break it down. I'll reply to 10 to 20 people a day, just going, "Hey, thank you," or "No, thank you," or whatever. So I started taking notes on everyone who'd offered their services and the ones that stood out. And then I kind of got like a short list of about 10. And then I asked them if they'd edit a sample, and 6 of them said they would love to edit a sample. And so I had 6. And then kind of the one that, I don't know, her name's Frances. Frances was the one that stood out to me from the very start, and like just from her initial email. And I ended up picking her despite the other 6 shortlists that were incredibly amazing. And so I decided, you know what, even though I've shortlisted 6, I'm going to reply to every single one and just be like, thank you for offering your services. I really appreciate it. But I've decided to move forward with someone else because even though it's saying no, I think to me, that's better than just leaving them hanging kind of thing. I mean, if you've ever applied for a job in the past or applied for anything in the past, and just being not heard anything back, well, it's kind of, I don't know, you kind of feel pretty shit. So I figured, well, I don't want, if these people are offering to help me, I don't want them feeling pretty shit that I didn't reply. And so even though I'm saying no, and the amazing thing was the replies I would get from the people who I said no to. Like, I posted one example in the blog post of the importance of the follow-up. And that was someone basically saying, you've made my day, even though, or this is the first time an author has replied to me and you've made my day, even though I was saying like, no, thank you for your services, or thank you for your offer. I'm moving forward with someone else. And I'm like, wow. And that was just like one of like a dozen replies that I got, like thanking me, like just being elated at the fact that I replied. And so the follow-up has 2 aspects. It's like that one to just give someone an answer so they know, because people, like, we're human beings. We hate uncertainty. Like, look at the times. The right now, the biggest thing that is everyone's problem is that we're kind of uncertain in how the world is operating. But anyway, the second part to it is that on my behalf, because I was so slow getting back to these 130 or so applicants, the ones who followed up with me like 2 to 3 days later saying, hey, Daniel, did you get my application? I got, due to recency bias, I got back to them quicker. And so this goes for, like, it's a note to myself, is that if in the first case you don't get a reply, don't be afraid to just go, hey, you know what? I'm gonna ask again. Worst case scenario, someone says no. So the second part, yeah, follow up. You might get a response even though the first time you didn't get one. And then the first part is just letting someone know, hey, thank you for your offer. They'll probably appreciate it. So that's what I learned from that.
I love how you broke that down. And it's really so true. It's so easy to make someone's day by just replying back to them. And when you're the one applying, it's so easy for your email or your message to get lost in the junk. And it doesn't hurt to send a second message. So kind of switching gears a little bit. Dude, you're a data scientist, so I couldn't not talk to you about what's going on in Neuralink. And you had a whole thread on this, and you've probably spent a lot more time than me thinking about this stuff. So break it down to me like I'm a 10-year-old. Like, is Neuralink, could it actually do is it actually possible what Elon Musk is proposing? Like, put a chip in your brain that makes you like 1 million times smarter? Like, break this down for me.
Well, I need to preface this that I'm still figuring this out myself, and I'm by no means like a what's it called, a neuroscientist expert or computer hardware engineer. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle with Neuralink. So you've got like the hardware engineering. So that's like the materials, like the device itself. That's one problem. Then you've got like the software engineering, which is how a device would communicate or interpret signals in the brain. And then what do you actually do once? So even if you can interpret those signals, like what do you actually do with them? And then you've got, the neuroscience part, which is, okay, so we can develop this piece of hardware that can read electrical signals, which is basically what the brain is spewing out. Well, at least as far as we know so far. What does that actually mean? So if we put it in this certain region of the brain and we insert 1,000 electrodes and they go into different regions, do we know what this electrode 187 is doing? Is that different to what electrode 720 is doing? So there's a lot of, like, I think Elon in the recent update said they've got like 1,000 people maybe, or 100. I don't know. It was a number. It was 100 something. I can't remember if it was 100 or 1,000 people, but he said like by the time it's to where they're sort of talking about the things that you kind of see in the media, like the hyped up stuff of like making you 1,000 times smarter, making you be able to replay all your memories as if they're a movie. Like then you're needing an enterprise then of like 50,000 people. So he said, yeah, it's a couple of orders of magnitude increase in the number of staff that they have. But the goal here is how I understand it. And this is very primitive. This is only me watching and reading about it. Is you have this device, insert, it replaces a piece of your skull. At the moment, there's 1,000 or so electrodes. Those electrodes insert into your brain, and they're able to pick up the electrical signals that your brain uses to communicate to itself. So if I have a thought and that gets read by a traditional brain scan, it might look like electricity jumping through a bunch of wires. And so how I understand it is those electrodes intercept that signal that passes between different neurons. And then, so it reads that signal, and then you take that signal, and there's a bunch of very smart software engineers who are going to collect those signals over time so that they have a database of okay, for the last 24 hours, I know that in this region of the brain, you were thinking like this, or here's the signals that we've measured. Let's see if we can find patterns in those signals. And so one of the demonstrations that they had was they'd implanted the actual Neuralink device into a pig, into its motor cortex, which is what controls your movement. And so they had this pig walking on a treadmill, and they had one graph which had 4 lines on it, and for each line was one limb of the pig. So you could have a blue line for the left leg, a green line for the a green line for the front right leg, red, yellow leg, etc. And so these lines were moving along this graph up and down. And so there was one dot on each of the lines, a circle dot, which was the actual movement of the leg. So it was tracking up and down as the pig walked along the treadmill. And then you had a triangle, which was 4 triangles, one for each of the legs, which was the prediction of where the Neuralink software thought that the leg position would be. So it's kind of hard to describe this without like a graph, but so this pig's walking along the treadmill, and the Neuralink device is trying to predict where each of its legs is going to be. But because, of course, they can see the pig, they know where the legs are going to be. So what the demonstration was comparing Neuralink's predictions to where the legs were based purely off the electrical signals that it was reading from the pig's brain versus the actual leg position that the pig had, like based off a camera feed or something like that. And what was really like incredible was like how close it was to predicting where like the pig's limbs would be. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine like the circles are the actual position and the triangles are the predicted position, the triangles were like half cut off by the circle because they would fit into each other. Wow. And so this is just on a graph displaying as the pig's actually walking. And so that's like level 1 compared to being 1,000 times smarter and connecting to the internet and whatnot. But this is just kind of like a proof of concept where, well, at least in my eyes, where it's like, well, hey, we've got this device physically working. And of course, scaling up is going to be an incredibly hard challenge. But what excites me a lot about it is, so my dad has Parkinson's, dementia, and Alzheimer's. And so a lot of these like cognitive diseases are basically from misfiring signals in the brain. So if you imagine if they're at Neuralink are at level 1 right now, where they can predict the limb positioning of a pig based off the electrical signals in its motor cortex, there's a lot of other things that you can sort of pick up in the motor cortex and potentially, there's 2 big points here. That was Neuralink reading the electrical signals. What's going to be more exciting is when it's able to write electrical signals. So you could imagine if it's picking up those signals and it starts to get an idea of what's happening. Again, this is where my knowledge of how neuroscience and Neuralink in general works. But the idea is, imagine if you could, you know how the signals work when you're reading them. Imagine if you could put an input into Neuralink and it could write those signals to your brain, and so that you get the feeling that your, say, front right leg is in the position that it should be, but you didn't actually have those thoughts. That was like Neuralink doing it for you.
Oh my God.
Again, I may be wording this incorrectly, but the big emphasis that Elon had was the ability to not only read electrical signals in the brain, but to write them. And so that's where the really exciting point comes, for the future, is for people with cognitive ailments, such as one of the big ones they talked about in the recent release was blindness. So again, there's a pretty clear, from what they said, apparently there's a pretty clear disconnect from those who experience some sort of vision blur with electrical signals, but we just don't have the ability to mend those properly yet. But that's something that Neuralink may be able to target, is to, like, I'm thinking of it like in a very 5-year-old way of thinking of it, is like the wire between your eyes and your visual cortex has been like smushed or something like that. Neuralink comes in and basically mends that wire. Maybe completely wrong, but that's kind of what I'm picking up in terms of the explain it like I'm 5 terminology. But again, don't quote me on that.
Dude, well, it's scary and it's crazy. And what it probably feels like is what people felt like when the internet was getting introduced in like the 1970s, 1980s, where you have some people being like, no, you don't get it, the potential is real. And other people being like, there's no way he could actually make that happen, or that's not possible. And
yeah, don't
you know
bet
what
against
I mean?
Elon.
Yeah, exactly. That's rule number 1, right?
Yeah, you'll go. Have you seen that guy actually? This is a tangent, but there's another electric car company that's like a competitor, and it's called what's it called? Nikola. So like Nikola Tesla, they called themselves Nikola. And there's this guy dude, I really hope that he pulls off what he's saying. But basically, there's heaps of videos of him announcing all these cool things, but they haven't built a single vehicle yet. And so he's saying things like, I think I'm the only guy on the planet who can out Elon. We got this new electric vehicle truck that's just going to decimate the market and all this sort of stuff. But they haven't built a single car yet.
That's real and it's not a parody? That sounds like a joke.
No, dude, that's legit. He's saying that, and I'm sort of watching this going, whoa, this is I was thinking the exact same thing as you. Is this a G up? But no, it's full blown legit. Their company's listed on the stock market, and they haven't. But this is, I don't know. Maybe it could be a complete scam. But I actually hope that he delivers on what he says, because he's saying good things. So, part of me is oh, I can't wait for this dude to go to jail. But the other part of me is because he's committing fraud, basically, because he's saying all these things. The stock price is going up to, I think it's $30,000 US. It's actually ridiculous. And here's another caveat. A couple of months ago, he cashed out 70 million of the stock and bought this massive mansion. So what kind of founder's doing that before you even delivered a product? Anyway, tangent. But the other half of me is I hope, because all this stuff that you're promising sounds dope. So I hope that you deliver on that.
Yeah, man. That's crazy. I've never heard of that before, or that dude. So definitely going to have to research that.
If you look up Nikola, just the car company, and watch there's a video on YouTube, and I think it's a compilation of just all the things that he said, and it's just whoa, this guy, it sounds like he's getting people to join a cult.
Well, I think that Tesla sometimes seems that way to people as well, where Elon's creating like his own cult or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right. It could. I mean, I read a really great article the other day about how so a lot of innovation, the credit goes to the person who thought of like the idea or created it, but a lot, but not as much goes to like the person who sold the idea, like the huckster, like the salesman who basically got people excited. And so there was an argument in there that Christianity wouldn't be anything like Jesus. Jesus would have been nothing without St. Paul, because St. Paul was the one who was like spreading the word. And then or like Apple would have been nothing. Like, so Steve Jobs was like the showman, but Wozniak was the tech guy. But Elon's in this kind of space where he's both at the same time.
Wow.
Like he's the hardcore engineer as well as like the like the front guy, like
the huckster.
Yeah, the huckster, the one who's like getting people excited. Because I think about that too. Is like, yeah, you need almost, if you're doing something that sounds outlandish, you do need someone to be that, like that person who's selling it, because it's otherwise people aren't going to get excited about it. You need, if you're building something like Tesla, which is changing the entire paradigm of how vehicles or just energy, it's, well, their end game is not vehicles, it's energy, which is bigger than vehicles. If you're changing the entire paradigm of how society gets its energy, you need to have a lot of momentum behind you. So that's where the huckster comes in. Same thing with Neuralink. Like if you're changing how people think, like at a like chemical level, I mean, a lot of things do that, but is it like, this is like an actual piece of hardware external from the body inserted into your body. Like that's going to need a lot of huckstering.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting is like I look at your content, honestly, like I went on your YouTube page when I first found you and I immediately see this high energy dude, but then I also see you're like deep into machine learning. So when I think of you, I actually think of someone who has both of those elements of the salesman and also the coder part of him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I've kind of self-reflected that in myself too. Like I like my default is probably heavily extrovert. So I find like talking on video or being in front of a crowd, like I'm very comfortable in those kind of situations. But I find the balance. I need to, like, I recharge by being a nerd, basically, by being like just deep in code or writing for 4 to 6 hours straight at a time. And by the end of that, it's like, well, I need to. That's kind of where I found my balance. I think when I was learning, it was like, well, I do the study, and then it's like, well, Jesus, I need to talk to someone before I go crazy. Mm-hmm. And so, because a lot of my friends didn't know what machine learning was and still kind of don't. So I'm like, well, I can't talk to them. So I need to put something out there. And so that's kind of, I think, where I found the balance of the extrovert introvert time was when you're online or YouTube or whatever, you kind of dial it up a bit, you put on a show and whatever, you get people excited. And then when it comes to writing or being a nerd, you're just sitting in front of a keyboard for a while, being very quiet.
Yeah, I think it's an unfair advantage in a lot of senses because it's actually something that I was living in San Diego and this neighbor, one of my neighbors came up to me one day and she's like, you know, I see you interacting with like our neighbors and I see you reading books. Like it's really interesting how you're doing both of these things that, you know, like you're extrovert and you're introverted. So what I'm trying to say is that I relate so hard to that. And I think that it's not even something that I tried to cultivate, but it's just something that I'm so blessed to have, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's you can't even explain it. It's just your nature. Yeah. And I mean, I would get heaps of comments on my videos and whatnot saying, like, your energy is contagious and I can't believe your energy. And it's like, oh my gosh, you have so much energy. And like, I was just doing what I would usually do. Yeah. Like, fair enough. Sometimes like you are, like, I'm in front of the camera and I am just like turning it up. Like I see
Right.
it as you can turn it. I see it as a tool. Like you're putting on like a performance basically. And I was just like, wow, I didn't really notice that in myself, but it got to a point where it was becoming such a thing that I'd notice these comments. I'd be like, oh wow, okay, maybe my energy levels are different to the people who are watching. Because I was kind of thinking this, like, well, I'm posting these as if I want an audience who are kind of people who think like me, like or act like me. So I'm thinking that I'm posting videos that people like me are going to watch, and they do. There are people like me in some sense that watch it, but of course, the sort of the narrow-mindedness in me was that forgot, okay, they do have some interest in you, but not everything is the exact same. And so that's when I realized, it's like, oh, okay, maybe this energy thing is for lack of a better word, a talent of mine.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing, another point. Like me and my friend were having a conversation the other day. Is you often don't notice, like when you're in the situation, you don't notice things that people from outside the situation notice. So the classic scenario is like when your mate's like dating in a terrible relationship, and you're like, dude, like you're wrecking it, or like your life's just a tragedy right now because you're always upset, you're always fighting. And he's like, no man, she's a good girl, like she's great, like we'll figure things out. And then like 6 months later, when they eventually break up, he goes, whoa, yeah, she wasn't really a good girl. And then you're like, well, I told you so. It's because you were outside the situation, and they were in the situation, inside the circle. So they couldn't see what was going on. It was only the third eye perspective that could go, well, you know what? Here's what I see. You're immune to everything because you've got, like, this is your life. I'm looking at it as an outsider.
Absolutely. And you know what's so crazy is that literally today I have a tweet scheduled that says, like, state the obvious. Your friend needs to hear it. And just like exactly what you're talking about. And it's true, like even someone who's self-aware, and I consider myself self-aware, and you seem like a pretty self-aware dude, even someone who's self-aware isn't going to notice everything that you notice as an outside observer. So it's really so true. And sometimes just telling your friend in like a kind way, this is what I think about your life or whatever, like can go a long way in helping them with whatever they're doing.
Yeah, like me and my best mate, we would often, like when we were younger, I think we would clash a lot and like have like just fights basically because we would do that to each other, and we thought it was a personal attack, as in like, hey bro, I'm noticing this, and one of us, or me or him, would react as if like, oh well, you're saying that because you think you're better than me or something like that, when in reality it was coming from a place of kind-heartedness. And I think it's only over the last, I would say, even now actually, I would say I'm still practicing getting better at it. Like when someone actually goes, hey Daniel, I think you could whether it's a piece of work or whether it's actions, I think you could improve here. I'm still figuring it out. Like there's still something in me, like my knee-jerk reaction is to go, well, fuck you, basically, like you're having a go at me. But then it's only like once I process it for a bit, it's like, oh no, this person is not like attacking me, they're trying to help me be better. So I'm probably still working through that. Like I still have like a knee-jerk reaction when someone offers like improvement feedback or whatever. It's like, oh well, fuck, I could have figured that out myself and just done it myself. It's like, who are you to tell me what to do? But no, I would say, yeah, part of it's self-awareness, and then part of it is, yeah, I don't know, just not taking yourself so seriously is that's actually probably one of my big missions at the moment. That's a lifelong mission.
So, yeah, I mean, my question then becomes like, how do you get better at not taking yourself seriously? Especially when you're someone like we both are, someone who wants to achieve things and someone who's disciplined, right? It's like we could get the tendency to get narrow-minded and focused on our thing and be like, the world revolves around this. So how are you practicing ways of not taking yourself so seriously?
I think it's, I like to do like writing, like thought experiments, like, or creating space from whatever it was that I was doing. So a simple real one is like whenever I'm like stuck deep behind a screen or like getting deep into a problem and I finished a large block of work, like I'll just go for a walk in nature for an unknown amount of time, just notice. I'll be like walking around and be like, so I live close to the water. I'll watch the waves, watch the trees, and just realize just like whatever I was just working on, like none of this stuff gives a crap. Like it's still here. Like this is just, it just keeps going. So like all those like perils and whatever that I thought like, oh, I couldn't work out this coding problem, or like my students are having problems understanding the teachings that I've been given. It's just like, well, yes, you can handle those. But then as soon as you disconnect from the space, it's like, well, I don't want to say cease to exist, but they leave your mind for a bit. Mm-hmm. And then another one is like when I'm writing is kind of just to like, I'll be the one who's giving myself feedback and going, oh, Daniel, you said you were going to do this, but it's really like, I can't wait till like eventually when I do pass and like all my private journals get published, is like people are going to read them and be like, whoa, that's crazy. Maybe that's when all my bestsellers will come out, is when my private journals go live. It's kind of like just having a conversation with myself is like, you said you were going to do this, you did this, and then I'll keep going like down and down, and until eventually it gets to a point where it's like, well, I'll realize that once those thoughts are in like the physical world, or in letter form, in word form, I'll realize it's like, well, hold on. I'll just start smiling and be like, wow, look at all this concern, and for what? Mm-hmm. And then I'll just remember it's just time to have fun. I'll start dancing around or whatever, and just laugh. Like I'm having a hard time putting it into words, because I think it's a lot of these practices that sort of like people offer in terms of like, do this, do that. They're very like I'm a big fan of directives, like from someone you trust, but at the same time, I'm a big fan of like figuring out what practices work best for you. So if I like say like what I do and what not, of course I understand the value of like hearing what someone does, but like one of my favorite posts that I did over that 528 days was copy others until you create your own style. And so that's kind of what I feel like I've done. And I'm saying this as if like my style is perfect or whatnot, but I think it's perfect for me at the moment. Is that like I basically just try to have fun, remind myself to have fun with whatever it is that I'm doing, and it's a very simple principle. It's cliche as hell, but I mean, it works. The cliches work. That's why they're cliches. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the writing to myself thing is just like having a group discussion with myself and just going, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I've got to do. Here's the counter argument to that. And then I realized, okay, well, all these problems that I thought I was having in reality aren't that great. And then the last one, actually, I got this. I was reading through your blog post the other day, and I read through your meditation like summaries challenge. How you did 60 minutes every day for 60 days, and the one that stood out to me the most was just the one where you kind of lost all aspect of time, and that's when I realized I feel most alive when I forget that I'm alive. If that kind of makes sense, but I'll unpack it. It's as in when I forget that I'm alive, it's because I'm completely submersed in whatever it is that I'm doing. And it's counterintuitive, but you like kind of forget that you're like living. It's just like you're just when you're in the like flow state or whatever it is, just completely in the moment, it feels like you've just slipped into the energy wave of the entire universe, and you're just a part of it. But when you're outside of that, well, then that's when the sort of the perils of life really start to penetrate your brain.
I love what you said about nature and how like nature humbles you, because I think it's so true.
Yeah.
And also thank you for reading my work, and I really appreciate it. And it's crazy because like you, I just expect everything to get 0 views, and I have no expectation for anyone to read anything I write. And then, you know, when someone you respect and look up to is like, yeah, I read your work, it means a lot to me. So thank you for that. And yeah, man, what you're talking about is like what's happened in this conversation for me, right? It's like you forget that this is a conversation. You forget what we're doing here, and we get lost in the moment. And that's such a beautiful thing. And you can't really even take yourself seriously when you're just getting lost in that moment. So it's beautiful, brother.
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
It's a laughing skull. That's where we'll all end up. A laughing skull.
Exactly. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap this baby up. Give everyone who's listening, tell them where they could find you. And dude, it's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, man, this has been great fun. Best place to find me is at my website, mrdbourke.com, mrdbourke.com, or if you Google my name, I've got enough content and crap out there that the search engines seem to like me. But otherwise, yeah, I've said in this episode that I'm pretty poor at getting back with emails, but I do eventually get back to them all. So daniel@mrdbourke.com is my email address. You can reach out to me, say hello to me. I live in Brisbane, Australia. So if you want to hear about what it's like down under, let me know. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Dude, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time and giving your wisdom, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Danny. Really appreciate it, brother. Let's do this again.
That was my conversation with Daniel Bourke. And if you enjoyed this episode, let me know on Twitter @HeyDannyMiranda. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I appreciate you so, so much. And I'll see you guys in the next one.